Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So with us tonight, we have over yonder, Mala. How you doing, Mala?
Good evening, everyone.
And we have over yonder, Mike Christensen. How's it going, Mike?
Very well, thanks for asking. Hello, everybody.
All right, if this is your first time at Shop Talk, welcome. If this is not your first time, I finally figured out the black bar thing at the bottom, so it's going well again. So now you can see the text even when I'm going to show a page. But if this is your first time, you have no idea about the black bar at the bottom, and hopefully you have no idea what Shop Talk is, because otherwise it'd be a little weird. But Shop Talk is where we get together. It's Monday, it's after work, at least on the East Coast, and let's talk a little bit of tech stuff. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the data platform world, and a couple of interesting blog posts, as well as open Q&A. So if you've got questions, you want to learn something about SQL Server, about anything data platform space, hit us up, and we will at the very least stammer, hem, and haw. So you're going to get 3 for the price of 1. So with that, let's talk about first topic of the day. And that is this next week. So not this week, but next week. Both Past Summit and Live 360 are going to be running. So that's going to, you're going to find a lot of data platform community people at one or the other of those conferences. Not both, just because the logistics are too hard. I've tried that in the past. It just doesn't work out when one's in Orlando, the other's in Seattle. Nonetheless, you get a lot of people at one or the other. So welcome in, Red Nello. Good to see you again. I would expect that we're going to get some interesting information to drop at Past Summit. That tends to be the norm for Microsoft and SQL Server. Don't expect a new version of SQL Server. I can't see them dropping that information. There's been nothing about a new version up to this point, and 2022 is still pretty new. But
Maybe Fabric server.
I'm sure that there will be a lot on Microsoft Fabric. Not about server, because Fabric is software as a service. But I am positive that there will be a lot on Microsoft Fabric, and I haven't even looked at the agenda for Past Summit.
So those are the sessions I just posted there are going to be live streamed for free. You don't have to be registered or be there in person to see them, and it does not need any registration either. That link has information on how you can watch the session. So the keynotes and the Women in Tech session and a few sessions are going to be live streamed.
Yep, a few Microsoft ones. I see data warehousing simplified in Microsoft Fabric. There may actually be more than that. Nope, there's only the one Fabric session that will be live streamed for free. And welcome in both of you, Anders and Keone. Hopefully, realize that I'm going to mispronounce half the names. Like Anders probably doesn't even pronounce his name that way. He's just been lying all these years. Just a laugh under his breath when people mispronounce it. But yeah, so that looks like a pretty good list of sessions. Quite a few things, even if you're not going to Seattle, even if you haven't signed up for Past Summit, that's available. Live 360, that's where I'm going to be. So if you're down in the Orlando area and you're at that conference, come hit me up. The question isn't how I pronounce it, it's how my mother does. I mean, that's a fair point. That is a fair point. Although you are over the age of 18, so I think you probably can get away with it unless, the parents are around. No budget for conferences. Yeah, that can be a trouble, Mike. That's especially the last couple of years. A few years ago, I think it was a little easier to get approval for going to conferences.
Right.
There was more of a culture of understanding that, yes, you have to pay for continuing education. And with a lot of remote and hybrid work over the prior 3 years or so, yeah, I think a lot of companies have said, well, that's the line item we can cut from the budget. And there are going to be some long-term ramifications to that if it continues. But hopefully, at least you'll be able to see some of those sessions, Mike. Our entire DBA team is going to Summit. Yeah, that's not bad,
great.
Anders.
That's very nice, Anders. That's pretty unusual, and that's
I
very
think
nice.
he's making a joke that it's just him.
I mean, that could be.
No, he has another DBA with him. I know that.
Okay. So two
So
people.
it's not just him. So it's maybe the two of us, or now maybe the team is even bigger.
Anders also has multiple personalities. I made them put it in our contracts. That's really smart.
That's sensible, yeah.
So
That's not Anders.
I had it in my contract too. Unfortunately, we got bought out, and that contract does not hold that much validity.
yeah. Yeah. I could say more, but I'm gonna not say more on this because it seems like it's probably best not to talk about it. Working remotely, pay cut, working in office, conference sponsorship cut. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's unfortunate.
No, you're not. If you can work remotely, you can train remotely. It's not actually wrong, in my opinion.
They've
And
increased.
networking, our personal networking needs have never been a company need to fulfill. I mean, there are some companies that think that's a good thing, and they're fine with it, but it takes a liberal attitude, and most people don't care.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that
Yeah.
there are major benefits, but a lot of the benefits for the company tend to be second order effect as opposed to first order effect
Valid.
around networking. With working from home, there's even more need to go in person for conferences. Yeah, just get a chance to see people, to remember that there are other people who exist, and even get an opportunity to share ideas with people who have similar backgrounds but may not always agree with you. Because the cat usually doesn't respond very much. Cats understand what we're talking about, but they just don't care. Take Coursera Duke classes. Yeah, tuition benefits are good. I had those when I worked for State of Ohio, and yeah, just being able to audit a class every once in a while, that is quite helpful. Good for keeping the mind sharp.
And they have very specific ones in our field, like R, data science, machine learning, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Duke classes are so damn expensive. So expensive. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Sure.
sidetrack.
Well,
Yeah.
because it's a private school.
Yeah.
So you're also not. It's not a community college. It's not a technical school. So they're pricing for people who are there for 4 years and either have a lot of money or are willing to take $200,000 in loans to get a degree in underwater basket weaving, and then never pay it off.
I would call it affordability challenged.
It is. The whole thing about cost and data science degrees is a subject of discussion. It's just unbelievable.
I know that I don't know if the general
Really?
public can take Coursera classes for free. You can audit them. I don't know how that works with Coursera, but let me look, because you can take Duke classes. Like they're real Duke classes. They're the real data scientists that teach those classes.
Yeah.
Well, Redbeat is promised to look into a virtual option for next year, and SQL Bits has one firmly in place. So those are advantages too.
Yeah, as far as the continuing education college courses that are online, in a lot of cases, those will either be prior semesters that were all recorded, or you're paying. So, I mean, it's not bad. There are some live MOOCs, the massive open online courses, and sometimes those will be going on. Those will actually be live, but then now you have to commit. And I think that's going to be the hardest part with remote work and remote learning, is that willingness to commit, that willingness to put in that time. I need to spend 4 hours this week working, doing this homework when, well, I mean, there's other stuff that has to go on. I don't have to mow the lawn anymore for the next 6 months, but had that house repairs, stuff comes up, emergencies happen, weird stuff happens, and then you say, I just don't have the time to study. And it can be
Oh,
a lot
nice.
easier. It's a lot harder when you have to commit to be in person, even if you're not being graded on it. There's still, there's still some aspect of there are humans who expect me here, and that can be enough of a motivator, even when like I don't really feel like it, but and then you just go.
No, there are companies that take pride in going back to the conference thing. There are companies that take pride in saying that their employees are speaking. I know I worked at 2 places like that. Channel advisor, the former channel advisor was one of them, and there was another place before that where I worked was like that too. My boss was very proud of the fact that I was speaking, and he would go, he would make sure that they pay for it. But because you say that you are working at some place, and that goes out to a lot of people, and they're proud of it, and that sort of a thing, that's publicity for them. But no, I wish more companies would think that way, and more people would speak, and that's one way to go, at least.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a valuable thing to have that philosophy. Um, One of my least favorite job interviews was one where the discussion with the hiring manager. Basically, I got through 3 of the 4 sets of interviews. It was very smooth. It was very nice. I loved everything for the most part. At least I was acceptable with everything for the most part. But then 4th interview, basically it was series of questions and trying to push the technical specific questions were fine, but there was some side tangent where we were talking about community, and that manager's response was, well, I don't like having my people in there because you go to those user groups and nobody ever does anything. That's not where people who do things go.
Whoa,
And I'm like,
really?
that's really dumb.
I guess he hasn't seen your 500 YouTube videos, I guess.
Or
Do what things?
yeah, or you say, well, okay, who do your people learn from? And then if you start listing names, like, oh yeah, those are all people in the community. It's rare that you find somebody that you really learn from who isn't involved in the community in some fashion, because it's kind of how the circuit works.
Well, it's funny. It's almost comical answer, because when I read some of the books that I've been reading, that I have some of your books, Kevin. You guys aren't doing it to become millionaires. I mean, you guys are doing it to share your knowledge, and I'm very grateful. Like, writing a 600-page book is no joke. It takes multiple years and a lot of work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty wild assumption.
Yeah, and for the book, for the Polybase book, I probably made about $8 per hour on that book. Maybe it was like $12 per hour. So no, I'm not doing that for the riches.
Well, you could have been at Best Buy, maybe being a security guard and then doubling up. You can.
Probably, I would have made more money that way.
Yeah, you could have done the work there. Yeah, there you go.
There are people who get the community thing. Usually, people who have done some sort of community work themselves. There are other people who think you actually make money on the side and you don't want to be open about it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Oh, I've had all sorts of stories around that.
Making those
So
sweet.
University of Louisville Speed School in University of Louisville used to host our SQL Saturdays for 3 or 4 years. They gave us a free. It was a good building, and it was free, totally free in the early days of SQL Saturdays. So we used to run our event there, and these 2 professors, computer science professors, the third or fourth time, once they asked me, if I could, after the event, he asked me, can you take me out to lunch? Can you take us out to lunch? And I'm like, it's a strange request, right? Do you ask someone to take you out to lunch? But okay, you guys have been nice. I mean, given us a free location. Okay, let's go. And we went for lunch and we're eating, and he leans over the table at me. Tell me the truth. How much do you make off of this thing? Huh? Okay. It's like, what? This event that you run every year, you do so much of work, you and the people with you, sure you make money on the side, right? How much do you make? Like, dude, we don't make any money on the side. I'm sorry you find that so hard to believe. And both of those professors, they were like, they would not believe that we don't make any money off of it. They really honestly thought we made money and we were not being public about it. So they wanted to go for lunch and ask me this question, literally this question.
Yeah, and I can understand a little bit of the incredulity because, well, first in the academic world, in a lot of cases, yeah, you're not going to do a lot of work on the side outside of your main employment unless you're getting paid or you've got a grant or something. But in many other industries, you're not putting on conferences just because you want to, just because you want to get some people together.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at most other professional industries, you think things like accounting, law firms, or not law firms, but lawyers, you look at those types of people who typically need continuing education because either the field is changing so frequently or they need to continue proving that they have a certain skill level.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's putting on free conferences for lawyers or for accountants.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all most certainly paid. Those are not volunteer efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And it is different in this technical world where we have a expected culture of information is free and so is sharing that information, with some exceptions of, all right, well, I understand you're putting on a big conference, so people have to pay for it. But this idea of SQL Saturdays is just existing, and yeah, of course, some people are going to put together an event once a year where they're not making any money off of it and are putting in dozens, maybe hundreds of hours of volunteer effort to just have an opportunity to get together for a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
That is a lot of the impetus behind it. And that does strike people in other professions as weird because there's no way they would do that in their fields.
Mm-hmm.
Part of
I'm
the free.
thinking of
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I'm belaboring the point, but I was listening to Jeff Fritz because he works at Microsoft and he's at the top of his game, right? So he probably makes decent money, but he does all this streaming on his own where he teaches people C# and .NET, and he's managing the .NET conference, and I'm sure he doesn't get paid extra for that. And he actually was talking about how he made this Clip Talk thing, a full enterprise web app, and taught people how to do it. And he's like begging for, money to be donated for, the storage because he doesn't make any money. It's like it costs money because it's like a large app that serves up video. So he needs to get server space from AWS and others. So yeah, these people work their butts off for other people, which is really nice.
Sure. Similar story with Adam Saxton and Patrick LeBlanc, where Adam didn't start Guy in a Cube because Microsoft told him to. He just did it on his own, and Microsoft was like, okay, that's cool. And eventually, it got to be more of, well, now Adam and Patrick are basically Microsoft spokesmen who are among the public faces for Power BI. A lot of that just came out of, Adam wanted to do something cool, wanted to share some information to give back. So going back through a couple of comments in here, Rednello mentions building an app for an employer who has a requirement. The employees have a portal to update their continuing education so higher-ups know who's best qualified for certain projects. Yeah, that's an interesting take. I think that, combined with well, how people have done on prior projects, I think that's really useful because gives an opportunity for a more junior person to be able to say, hey, I've learned enough about this. You haven't given me a project on Databricks, but I've got this certification, or I've spent time working through these courses, or I've worked on this open source project, whatever that proof of effort may be. But now I might be qualified for a new Databricks project in that case. So it is a good philosophy to have. I think that's a uncommon employer, but smart. And digging in through here, part of the free and the SQL community is, I think, where we were the underdog compared to the other database engines. I could see that. And even still, I think there is still some of that mentality where Oracle is still the big player. And I think Oracle is less of a big player than it was, and SQL Server is much more of a big player than it was 15 years ago. But yes, I believe that is true. Also, one thing going in Microsoft's favor historically is that they have been very developer centric, and not just with Steve Ballmer screaming on a stage. They have always, for the most part, have historically focused on backward compatibility, on more thorough documentation, on providing information. They've been much more open about user groups, about communities than most other organizations in that are comparable. Think Oracle, think IBM, that kind of 70s and 80s, maybe 80s and 90s old school player in the tech field. You didn't tend to see a whole lot of conferences that were Oracle specific or IBM specific outside of maybe they put on 1 or 2 events per year. So there certainly was a different philosophy in terms of friendliness to third parties, friendliness to developers, friendliness to extending what they created, that they realize they're not the final creators of the product, that there are layers of that after them. Now, sometimes that kind of bites us because you'll get that philosophy of we're going to put out a product and then people will extend it and we'll make it complete. And when people don't extend it and make it complete, then you just kind of leave them hanging. Like the changes with ML services where, you can extend this and include other languages. Hypothetically, that's a really cool idea. In practice, who's going to create those extensions? There was talk about a C# extension. I don't know where that went. I don't know if that ever got pulled off successfully. And I know Microsoft was helping with that. But just that idea that it's hit or miss when people are going to be willing to say, yes, I want to dive in and I want to provide more. You'll see a lot of Visual Studio Code extensions. You see fewer Azure Data Studio extensions that are non-Microsoft. And I think that's kind of funny because the two are using the same platform. So pro tip, you can actually take a lot of Visual Studio Code extensions, download the MSIX, and load it directly in Azure Data Studio, and it will work even though it's not available from the extensions menu in Azure Data Studio. Not all of them will work, but a lot of them will work. Yeah. Yeah, so if you have...
That's crazy.
Yep. So if you've got something, like for example, there's an extension in Visual Studio Code called Rainbow CSV. And Rainbow CSV is extremely useful. It's something that I learned about not too long ago, but essentially what it does is it takes your CSV file and will color code the different columns so that you can see. Actually, let me just share the screen right now. So you can see.
I can't believe it. This is crazy. This is crazy.
So for this image here, we've got color coding of all of the different, oh, that won't help, of all of the different columns. So white, original title; blue, year of release; white, or whatever the color is, duration; genre, director; and average score. Back in my day, we did fixed width and we liked it. You know, you might be onto something, Anders. Green monochrome. Oh, orange monochrome. I preferred the orange ones. You liked green more, Mike? All right. Well, that's all right. Still take that fixed width. But yeah, so this extension, Rainbow CSV, is a Visual Studio Code extension. And I can download the extension. I'm going to download it in here. And then let's open up Azure Data Studio. Now, I am taking a risk because I have not tried this. More of the Toshiba orange. I don't remember Toshiba from that era. Plasma screens forever. That's... All right, so let me see if I can share a window. Let's do this one, Azure Data Studio. And if I have lived a good life, I can install an extension from a VSIX package. And in my downloads, I have Rainbow CSV. This is a third-party extension, so I'll say yes. Unable to install extension. Oh, this one won't work. Not compatible with engine version 1.70.0. Okay, so that one burned me. There are other extensions that will work, but it seems like maybe that version of Rainbow CSV is a little older. Or excuse me, sorry, the version of Azure Data Studio's Visual Studio Code shell is a little older because I'm running 1.83 locally. So I could probably go to the Rainbow CSV page, look at prior releases, and grab an older version of this, maybe that runs on a prior version of VS Code. And, you know, maybe that'll work. But in any event, in some cases, for some extensions, you'll be able to use this and load in an a Visual Studio Code extension in Azure Data Studio. You just have to make sure, apparently, that the version of VS Code under the covers. So you can see VS Code version is 1.70. You just have to make sure that the VS Code version under the covers is going to support whatever extension you've got.
That's cool. Something to try, yeah.
Yeah, and for something like Rainbow CSV or some of the other, maybe Markdown stuff isn't going to be useful, or editing YAML. But there are some cases where, hey, I'm loading a CSV file, or I want some sort of extension to try out one of my other quality of life extensions. Ooh, I've got a new version. Okay, so I've got a new version of Azure Data Studio. I'm going to try to install this extension again. Hey, so let me share my window again. I didn't show it because I didn't want to show failure twice. But this time, completed installing Rainbow CSV extension from Visix. And if I go into extensions, I don't know if I'm going to see. Yeah, I'll see it, Rainbow CSV. So I've got that installed. It is not available in the marketplace as far as I recall. Yeah, it's not available in the marketplace, but if you have a new enough version of Azure Data Studio and you have the ability to download that extension, you can install it, you can use it in here, and that's a SQL query, so I would have to create a new CSV file. I won't dig up a CSV file and show it off because I think the screenshot does a pretty good job of it, but I do like that Rainbow CSV viewer. I think it works well. There are a couple of others in the VS Code extensions library that you can use and also work well. Okay. The Mala says that the MVP program at Microsoft was also part of it. Clever way of using people to market and push the name as well as make a name for themselves. Yes. The long-running joke is that the MVP program is Microsoft's most successful unpaid pre-sales program. I mean, that's basically what we do. It's unpaid pre-sales. Let me tell you about why I like these products. Or sometimes let me tell you about why I don't like these products. And also, here's how you can get more out of this product. The remix of developers is great. I agree. I saw that a long time ago, and it is fun. Amber monochrome. Yeah, so Amber, I forget if it was Amber or Orange. It was one of those two that I liked. And as far as Rainbow CSV goes, I've got that link in the just above. I'll paste it in one more time because, yeah, I do like that extension a lot. I think it's a fantastic extension. If you have that latest version of Azure Data Studio, you can also load it there. It'll work in VS Code, pretty much any recent version of VS Code. So I do recommend checking that out. All of the time, all of the pain that you have trying to parse CSV files, when the easiest route is, let me load it into Excel and then turn it into Excel columns so that I could actually figure out what this data is trying to represent. This helps. All right. Kind of going 180 degrees from this helps. Let me talk about something that I really enjoy that has no practical value. Unless, you want to play a game with one of your coworkers. So Tomas Kostrin has a great blog post that just came out earlier, basically his morning, which would have been late last night our time. And building Connect 4 using T-SQL. So I wanted to walk through this a bit because I loved the article. This is one of those silly things that, no, you shouldn't use T-SQL for, but it's too fun not to. And
hey, there's a reason why I bought 128 gigabytes.
Exactly.
To goof around.
Look, those servers are not running at 100%. You might as well get more value out of them. In case you're not familiar with Connect 4, the idea is that you have a grid and you're allowed to insert into one of the columns, and you have a token that falls down to the bottom of the grid, and you're supposed to make a connection of 4 in a row, vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. Reasonably fun game, way to kill time, and you can do this in SQL Server. So Tomas has this as a series of stored procedures because that is, after all, the correct way to implement this sort of logic. You initialize a board using an init procedure. You can display results at any point in time. You can check to see if there's a win condition, and you can add a token. And the nice part is that because SQL Server is a multi-user service, you can, of course, play against somebody else. So instead of just having to play Connect 4 on your own, you find another DBA or other person you can trust not to rat you out to the boss, and you can play against each other. The only right answer is not to play at all. That's tic-tac-toe. This is a totally different game. Also, thermonuclear warfare. I think thermonuclear warfare kind of falls in between tic-tac-toe and Connect 4. But that's the same concept. It's a game that's, I don't know, Connect 4 is much more winnable. That's crazy. I'm not going to share this with my team. I mean, you could play on your own. But digging into the logic behind this, I think it's... wait a minute, you're stealing my self-prescribed role of funny person.
Anders is. He's being funny tonight.
Yeah. Sometimes Anders is funny. By the way, Anders, if you want to put that on your resume, I'll let you do it. The 8 queens problem in SQL. I'm thinking, no, nobody's done that yet. But you could do it. So, okay, initialization procedure. You create a little table, con4t. That way, you know what it's for, but your boss thinks, oh, that just must be a regular business table. And a series of steps. So, player and column and the population of the board. And then display the results. The results display uses substring here and replacing values with X's or O's and fills in the gaps. Now, when you show this, you are going to want to have results in, you'll probably want to have results in text mode instead of grid mode. But you can use pipe enumeration, so we see these results. Check when. This is basically looking for certain conditions. Ones across, so ones to the end, ones across, ones at the beginning. And this looks like it's per column. Now, he's also got horizontal, but it looks like, diagonal is coming. So, okay. Column-wise is easy because I'm looking for 4 in a column. Row-wise, he's got board and column. So the board is built up of the columns, and we get to look across. But diagonals, how do you figure out 4 in either diagonal direction? And the answer, of course, involves multiple common table expressions. Because this is moderately advanced SQL, you will have multiple common table expressions. That's just a way of life. So we can start. You know what? I think this could be rewritten with apply operators. But inside diag 1A, we have the concatenation of column 1, column 2 through column 7 as row 1, column 1. We have C1 column 2, column 3, so on. Basically building up your 4 diagonals and joining the con4 temp repeatedly. Also left joining on 6. So basically inner joining throughout and then left joining on the last one. Not sure about that one. But we have our solution looking at all of the columns and really building up, trying to get the diagonals. Add token, basically a couple of error checks. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to track. You know what? You could rewrite this and have suser s name or something like that instead of user as an ID, because then, someone did the 8 queens. Interesting. You have a link to that, Anders? But you could use suser s name so that you could have 2 people going and Dan. Now I'm gonna see if I know this one. Oh, Itzik did it. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna pull that one up. Itzik did 8 queens about 15 years ago.
Boy.
Of course Itzik did. Yeah, that's the one that I'm looking at, Anders. Yep. So anyhow, add token. You could actually use the username to allow 2 people to play and to prevent something happening. Checking for correct order, making sure that the one person doesn't go twice, which means no mere mortal can understand it. And there's a while loop. Now, I understand for Anders' sake, this could have been a cursor. But this is also a fixed while condition. It kind of makes sense. But nonetheless, you can check out Tomaz's GitHub repository and play it on your own servers. I'm not responsible for any loss of productivity that comes as a result of this. Next up, we will take a quick look at ITSIC solving the classic 8 queens problem. So the executive summary. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Older version, in an older version of SQL Server, no less.
Yeah, SQL 2005. So arrange 8 queens on an 8x8 chessboard such that no 2 queens can attack each other based on regular chess rules. Once did the 8 queens in assembler. I'm reasonably impressed.
It's not even that long.
Now that was fun. Yeah, I could see that because you would have to push and pop so many things into and out of registers, and you don't even have enough registers to represent the 8 ranks or 8 files, much less all 64 spots. We only had to find one solution though. Yeah, well, you know what? One solution is fine. Figure 1 shows one possible solution, and ITSIC, of course, went the next level. Write a T-SQL solution, returning all possible results. Now, unfortunately, the figures no longer exist. So, if you click on this link, it'll be a 404 error. But you have 64 to the 8 permutations of the problem, which means that, well, we're probably not going to store each one of those results in a database somewhere because that's a significant number of rows. I would say hundreds of thousands, millions, billions, 281 trillion rows. I would say that the number of people I could trust to handle tables that range in the 280 plus trillion rows, very few. Very few people I would trust managing tables of that size. But if you're interested in this solution, I think some of this text is a little messy, and unfortunately, you'll probably want to find a better article than this, just because this is 15 years old and all the details got lost. Be a fun table to do a Cartesian self-join on. This is why you're not in that list of people I would trust for that, Anders. Because you would do that one time, just to do it once.
Just to see what would happen.
Just to watch the world burn. But yeah. So this is how I test my hardware. All right. But that is a valid solution that you could solve in SQL Server, and I may look into that a little bit further. The 8 queens problem in T-SQL just to see, because I could maybe see it being reasonably straightforward versus the structured programming style of building up a series of loops or trying to generate rules to minimize possible candidate solutions. I think it'd be a good one for my cursors versus set-based talk. Yeah, to compare the two solutions, because sure, this is not a common thing that we tend to solve a whole lot, but if you think about it for a little bit, that is multi-level structured rule set, and most companies have at least one problem like that. So interesting post. I'm now going to have to include it in the show notes. Of course, not sure I could do it set based. I would have to look into that some more. I don't know the algorithm off the top. I don't know the algorithm at all. I wouldn't say off the top of my head. Don't know the algorithm at all, or the tricks that people play to minimize the solution space. But I think that you could get at least some of that set based. That would be my assumption. Recursive common table expressions, maybe. All right. Now that I've got that link for our show notes later. Next up, Mike, you were talking a pre-show about how Oracle migrations are scary.
Yes. So our big business case is essentially we have one of the big players in the game is Epic, right? And so Epic supports multiple database implementations, and they're deprecating Oracle. I think in part it makes sense because Cerner is being bought by Oracle. So now there's like a kind of a conflict of interest because now Oracle is kind of in, competing in the same space as Epic. So I'm sure they're probably not super happy to continue Oracle support now that they're one of their biggest competitors. So in any event, one of the reasons I joined in 2018, which I was so grateful to do, was because we had long planned to move over to SQL Server even before the deprecation was announced by Epic. So totally unrelated. We've been planning on doing it anyway. So that sounds like a long time ago, but obviously these things take a long time. And so now we're really putting the pedal to the metal, have actual strategy, have people working on it every day. And Hail Mary is the wrong word, but like all the way down to individual people who own queries, like you need to, look at this, work on it, tell us what needs to be deleted, etc. So just one query, one of the DBAs and myself were going back on, it was like a pivot and unpivot. It was like a kind of a wide table that we were kind of turning into like a EAV type table. And it was a pretty complex query, I would say. And we could not get it to work in SQL Server. We just could not. So we're kind of like rewriting big parts of it, which is so time consuming, right? We have thousands of these queries. So the thing that I brought up in the show notes is kind of like, I see that there are different conversion tools. There's what is it? I forget the name of it. I have it open. And there's the migration assistant. And you had mentioned there's some key players in the field. So anyway, I was just bringing that up, like the whole idea of us lifting and shifting, 200 terabytes of data, maybe 1,000 schemas. It's a pretty complex environment because we have 25,000 kind of main tables, which sounds crazy. I think some feedback would be like, well, that's crazy to put in one database. It's because there's the eye center and there's surgeries. They have just zillions of different data points. So that's why it's so vast. So that's our big challenge. So it's kind of like I'm trying to think like from the group's experience or other professionals' experience on automation of some of this stuff. Like, are there some query tools that we can say, hey, take this query and can you help me rewrite this? And it might not be right, but it might be a good start, right? The easy example would be top versus offset, or versus offset fetch, or, you can't really do count distincts in some of the functions. So yeah, anyway, that's the big idea is like, if anybody has advice, we're open to it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've purposefully stayed away, changed job.
Data migration for Oracle, database migration assistant for Oracle. Or it could be more general. Like I know we're pivoting away from Oracle, but it could be like you're going from Postgres to SQL Server. Like, so yeah, I like that. Change job. That sounds awful. Yeah. Well, it is a good opportunity to like do spring cleaning, right? Like they're like, oh, that query is from 2012. Like we can just ditch that.
True. But that's still a little scary. I agree with Anders. So we'll see if anybody else has any wild thoughts in here.
And I can come back and feature I since you pointed me to some key names. I was doing some research, and I know Anna Hoffman has some stuff on it, and you said it was Kimberly that used to work for Microsoft that had a lot of
Kellen
expertise in it.
Gorman.
There you go. Yeah, so I'm gonna check into some of that.
Yeah, it does make sense. All right, so I think our final topic. Yeah, let's talk about this. Options for improving the performance of views. So this is something that Mike also wanted to talk about, and Kellen would be my choice. I agree. Kellen is fantastic at this kind of stuff. She does understand really well Oracle and SQL. If she were still working for Microsoft, then I'd say that's where Microsoft rep could reach out and engage her services. But now that she's at a different company, I don't know what that would look like. But it's fine. Final topic. Options for improving the performance of views. And so this is something that you mentioned you wanted to talk about a bit as well. This was from a while ago. Anything in particular, or do you want me to just start from the top and work our way down?
I can tell you. So one of the things that's challenges, right? So I've got Grant Fitchie's book, and I'm really pushing to finish Brent's class. So I think that a lot of things that I would normally have in my, wheelhouse, I can't necessarily do, because what we do is we have a massive 25,000 tables. Then let's just say we have this dimensional, smaller reporting database that's like 5,000 tables. And it tries to summarize a lot of things, like surgeries could be like, if you want to write a query about surgeries, it might be 500 lines long, and in this new reporting database, it might be like, okay, you only have to hit 3 or 4 tables, and it looks back at those 25,000 tables, right? And so the way that they expose that now in our new SQL Server instance is via views. So I effectively, all the main quote unquote tables they're all views now because of security and a variety of other features. So it is not as performant. Now, so we're having talks already. The hardware for Oracle is much more powerful than our current setup for SQL Server, and we're working on that. Nonetheless, it is way less performant, and we're all talking about ways we can, be good stewards of this. We change the isolation level whenever we do our queries. We also try to use the non-production database whenever we can, but ultimately sometimes we need to do large queries, like with 100 million records in like labs. So it was a Hail Mary too. I was kind of like, hey, is there anything we can do with views? So I'll leave it at that and see if you have any thought.
Yeah. All right. High level, at the end of the day, a view is just a saved query. It is a SQL query that is given an alias, and when you call that alias, you run the query. So select star from dbo.myview is equivalent to running the underlying query. Technically, it's basically, think of it as expanded out as a result of a subquery. So select star from open parens my query close parens, call that alias that as my view. So views themselves aren't a problem. However, the code in a view can be a problem, and joining together views can be a problem. I would recommend for those types of nasty queries, do look at the execution plan. Look at what exactly is going on. What is the table access pattern? If these are Oracle-centric DBAs who don't know a lot about SQL Server indexing, because indexing is different between Oracle and SQL Server, then there may be inefficient table access. Given that there are hundreds of columns and a lot of nastiness, I wonder if the views themselves are joining together a whole lot of tables under the covers. And also, if you're nesting views, that usually ends up being a dangerous situation in terms of getting good performance, because what'll happen is that at some point the optimizer just gives up and says, fine, you want to call that same table 9 separate times? I'm not going to try to figure out a plan that only calls it the one time you need it. I'll just let you call it 9 times. And performance goes by the wayside as a result. So nesting views can end up putting you in a bad situation, because what will happen in those nested views usually is that each of a certain number of the views shows, like, queries the same tables. And in reality, you could read through all of the code and simplify it down to a much simpler query, which is what the optimizer ought to be doing and could do if it had infinite time and infinite resources. But in practice, sometimes it will just fall apart. It will simply say, I can't figure out the optimal plan for this. I'm just going to find something that will give you the results that you desire, and the rest is on you.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Practical advice on here. Number one would be review the views. Look at what that execution plan looks like. It'd be just like reviewing any other query. You'd be looking for cases. Do you have a lot of lazy spooling? Do you have cases where you're reading many rows that don't actually get used? And in Century 1 Plan Explorer, that'll show up as an exclamation point where you can mouse over and it'll say, hey, you read 8 million rows to get this data, but you only returned 256 rows. That's usually a big sign that, you're missing an index. Even if it's using an index, you're missing a good index that is appropriate to this particular query. So review for that. Look for functions in the query. Look for nested views. Functions in views perform just as poorly as functions outside of views. And I think that's probably the starting point. For
That's great.
less complicated queries, there is a possibility of indexed views being useful.
I think that the rules are they're too restrictive for those.
The rules around
I
indexed
feel
views,
it.
yes, they are very restrictive. You cannot go cross database. You cannot have certain types of aggregation. You can only have certain types of aggregation. The views need to be schema bound so that they don't change on you. And there are several other restrictions in place. You cannot use certain data types. You can't use certain features of SQL Server. But for some types of problem, an indexed view can be a perfectly valid solution and can work quite well for performance. In this particular solution where you're talking about hundreds of columns, no, I would strongly recommend against indexed views in that situation. But yeah, I think at a core, I think it's going to be understand what is going on in the execution plan, understand what are some of the more common access paths for this view, if there are common access paths, and also possibly understanding what can you do. If you just had that query, how would you optimize that query? How would you promote access in the minimum amount of I/O and CPU? So are there common filters where you're always filtering by these 4 criteria? And if so, then you can index those. But I would also say, can you simplify those views? If it is joining 15 different tables to include 500 separate columns, then that can itself be an issue where you only need 4 of the columns, but in order to get that, the optimizer may have to go through a lot of rigmarole. And like Solomon says, yeah, how do the queries perform when you're not using the view? So you get to the view definition, you grab the query itself, and you run that. And then if performance is radically different, that would be a little weird. But
in this instance, we're not allowed to query the underlying table.
okay, so you can't query the underlying tables. Can you get execution plans?
Okay, I can get execution plans. I can technically do that, and I think that for diagnosis purposes, it makes sense, and I think I appreciate that feedback. I'm just saying that, like, on a general, with 250, 300 SQL writers, because we're such a big organization, I mean, not all of those people are writing queries all the time, but there are maybe 50 of us that do SQL like pretty much all day. We really do not allow querying the tables directly, because it's a reporting database, and it actually feeds back into Epic to a live database. So that's part of it too. It's serving multiple purposes, and so that's why they're so strict about it. But I can do that for diagnosis purposes, and I would, obviously talk to the DBAs about it before I did it. But
Yeah. I mean, my thought on that whole bit of views of security is technically yes, but no. I've never been a huge fan of use views of security and as a general concept. I know that was much more popular in the Oracle world, and maybe that bled over to this instance. I have seen people do that in SQL Server, but it's uncommon, in part because you can get yourself tied up in knots when your views are interconnected. And Solomon throws in a few extra things, which are mostly around just general good query writing as opposed to the views themselves, and looking at how the data itself gets migrated, and if data types in the base tables are correct, how are joins being done, ensuring that you don't have implicit conversion or certain types of explicit conversion that would end up with non-sargeable results, or sargable if you're wrong.
yeah, with a view that the SQL underneath it has a sargable, non-sargable.
And yeah, if the view underneath has a predicate that is non-sargeable, then you may be pulling back all of the rows for a column you don't even need and a join that you don't even need. That gives you no relevant information. So those sorts of things. Yeah, so that's, I think, and Solomon mentions here as well, asking these questions in particular because there are differences between Oracle and SQL Server. It may be more impactful than generic migration might account for. Right. And that's also where I was going with indexing, because, well, index strategies differ greatly between the two platforms. And so that is, those are a series of things that may lead you down the right path. But I think what we're going to do, we're going to wrap that up. We'll give Mike a chance
This is
to
awesome.
check it out.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, of course. And remember, next week we have Past Summit and Live 360. There will be no Advanced DBA meeting for this month. I had to double check that tomorrow is actually the first Tuesday. No Advanced DBA meeting for this month. There will be the main meeting. Mala is going to talk to us. We're going to get that posted on Meetup probably tonight. So stay tuned for that. That'll be the third Tuesday of the month. No data science or BI meeting. For December, we will have an Advanced DBA second Tuesday. We will have a main meeting third Tuesday. We will not have data science and BI on the fourth Tuesday. Hopefully, we'll see you at least one of those meetings, or Shop Talk, which will continue on for the most part on normal path. We may skip the first Monday in December. I'll be in Orlando for a conference, so we'll see if we're going to pull that off. Is the regular meeting this month going to be in person or online? It will be hybrid. There will be an online option. So online only. No. Regular meeting will be hybrid. So we will be at Tech Systems as well. And with that, we're going to wrap things up for this evening. So until we see each other at some future time, everyone, take care.